Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad to have you all here today. I am Laura, and welcome to Fempreneur True Confessions podcast. Angelique is unfortunately not able to make it here with us, but she is definitely here in spirit. And I'm sure if she can comment in, she probably will here shortly. Um, so, um, as you know, Angelique and I are really big on collaboration, non-compete mindset, an abundance mindset, and just really supporting women where they are in their business, how um, they present to the world, and all of that in the same non-compete collaboration type of world that we have. So we have an amazing guest here today, and we met with her before. I remember the meeting before, so I've been really looking forward to this. So I'm sure that this is going to be a really great time. But Kate Mollison is here, and Kate is a certified grief coach who uses a unique approach to promote awareness around the importance of grief. Using her own experience as a widow, Kate adds a personal touch to an otherwise isolating and difficult topic. She is the founder and CEO of On Tuesdays We Wear Black, a consulting company working as a grief and bereavement specialist, where she focuses on helping others understand the connection between grief and bereavement. Kate has several years of experience as a clinical case manager and as a certified playmaker. She uses a modality that helps people unlock joy and find peace and meaning again after loss. Kate is also actively working for legislative change surrounding bereavement and the bereavement laws, and is the host of the National Grief Awareness Professional Development Conference. By educating both individuals and businesses about the importance of grief integration, she provides education that fosters visibility and grief inclusion. Welcome, Kate. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have the conversation with you today.
Absolutely. Excuse me. I was reading, like, I need to cough. So glad. Normally, I was warning Kate before we came on that normally this is the part where Angelique kind of comes in and she's really good with the questions and the conversation and things like that. But I remember our conversation when we first met, our meet and greet. And we connected on so many levels in regards to the work that we do and things that we were all interested in and how fun that was. So and we were also talking about how, the beginning of the year started out for all of us and kind of how crazy it's been. So I do want to talk about your journey in business and what that looked like. I think your story is one of just a lot of grace and a lot of heart and grief. And being able to come on the other side of that is something I would love for our listeners to hear and be able to talk about, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. I always say, my life's an open book. You just have to ask me the question and want to know the answer, right?
Yes.
No, and thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share my platform, share my business, share my journey. I think that grief is not something that we talk about nearly enough. And if I can take my own experience and help other people go through something and not feel so alone in an otherwise very isolating experience, it's like standing in a crowded room and screaming and having no one acknowledge you, right? You can't explain it unless you've been through it. So for me, my journey started it's like 4.5 years ago at this point. So November of 2020 is when my husband passed away. He passed away unexpectedly. It was super sudden. It was medical negligence. So he had been dealing with like an orthopedic injury that, when misdiagnosed and undetected, and then like blew up and exacerbated and turned into this debilitating condition, where he basically was numb from the waist down, just randomly one day was just like, hey, I can't get off the couch. And we went through, up to that point was like weeks and months of various attempts to mitigate his condition. and then he just goes numb. And then we have emergency surgery. And so what I'm trying to say is it happened both very fast and very slow. Right.
Yeah.
So after he had the procedure to correct the problem, once we learned what was going on, there was aftercare that was botched, and he ended up having a pulmonary embolism and passing away in a rehab hospital 11 days after he went into the hospital. I had not seen him in person for 4 days because of COVID protocols. When I could see him at the hospital, it was for 1 hour at a time. My children did not get to see him. He left to go to the hospital when he went numb. We left urgently by ambulance, and then he never came home for my kids.
Yeah.
Like that's something that always sits like icky with me, right? But that whole several months was traumatic in and of itself. Being the project manager of my own life, I was still working a full-time retail job. I was being mom to the 2 kids. I have adult disabled parents. They were living with me at the time. It was like having 4 children, right? Managing my husband's time off stuff, trying to relay information to him while he's at the hospital, and dealing with COVID stuff and vaccines, and everything was kind of just in this weird tornado for months. And, obviously COVID kind of exacerbated that, but remove that from the equation and everything was still kind of just this like tornado. And then you get to the part where he dies, and it's even more chaos. It's like drinking from a fire hose, and you have to navigate things you never thought you would have to navigate. Right? Like you take that stress and that crux of all those things I was already dealing with, my full-time job and his benefit coordination and my parents and my kids. And then you take 60% of your income out of that equation, and you take and put funeral planning in that equation. And it is a nightmare. And people ask me all the time, like, how did you do it? I couldn't tell you. First of all, I probably just dissociated so hard because you're just in such immense grief. You're an autopilot. I didn't eat for almost 2 weeks after he died. And I think the first time I ate, it made me nauseous. I lost 40 pounds in 3 weeks because I just wasn't. Everything is upside down, right? And so it took me a little while to put my feet on the ground, but when I finally started to realize that the bills aren't going to stop, I still have to go to work and do stuff. And I wasn't well to do it. And then I went back to work, and that was like being waterboarded with gasoline, because everything I had to do for Craig's funeral or estate or the probate or the house or the kids all had to be done exactly while I was at work. There was no relief. And so I couldn't breathe. I was suffocated by my own life. And I finally had a mental breakdown, a significant, severe mental breakdown. And with no support from my employer, I asked for help repeatedly. I cried out. I reached out. I'm not the one to like call out or loaf on my responsibilities.
Yeah.
And to go to my manager and humble myself and say, I'm not well. I need to not be here. And for them to basically say like, well, we gave you your PTO. I don't know what you want us to do, until I literally broke. And then I had to go on short-term disability. And in that short-term disability, that's when I had the aha moment. And that's when I really think the business was born, was in that, oh my God, it doesn't have to be this hard.
Yeah.
Once that short-term disability leave was over and the fog had kind of lifted a little bit, and some of those to-dos were checked off and I could breathe a little bit, I started to be able to heal. Because the reality of it all is you either have time for grief or you have time for bereavement. And those two things are not interchangeable, and we treat them like they are. And so because I was so busy bereaving, the grief caught up with me and I had the breakdown. And then when I was allowed the space to like fix the foundation of the house and then heal, that's when I was able to see clearly again. And so it was about wanting to give that clarity without the fire hose to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's
Mm.
so well, and we think about that. I love the fact that you really speak about the difference of that, because we get bereavement leave, we get this time, you get this, and everybody understands like that's not enough time. You need time. Um,
Mm.
and I was able to play around with that with with my mom's death, and even then, and it was planned. Like we knew this was coming for a
Yeah.
long time. We had an idea. We'd said goodbye more than once already, and so we kind of had a different outcome there. And so I understood that this was just bereavement. That was my clear my head time. So I extended it out past a little bit and then was able to come back in. But the grief was the things that you had to face after that definitely took a lot more time. Um, but for whatever reason, instinctually, I just knew like, no, I just need a few more days. And that means everybody else goes back to what they're doing, and I just need a few more days.
Yeah. And
So it was like
the thing that
everybody
I
else can
didn't
do that.
learn until later on was like what the neuroscience supports is the brain chemistry about grief. You don't really start to experience those intense grief symptoms until like a month or more after the initial like death or loss or change or trauma or whatever it is. It's like there's a delayed
Yeah.
response. So it's great that you get your 3 days of bereavement leave immediately following. But the purpose of that is to like go to the funeral. Bereavement
Mhm.
leave is for people who have a funeral to go to, not a funeral to plan or be a part of. They need
Right.
they need more time because you don't even have the death certificate in 3 days. And
Mhm.
it's sad that that's the national average is 3 days because
Right.
employers think it is more profitable to reduce that time and then just have the employee call out or end up doing what I did and resign or job abandon, which we all
Yeah.
know costs more money. And it's like, how do we start collaborating with our employees? How do we start fostering an environment of empathy, of inclusion, of
Mhm.
understanding, right? And I don't want to get it
Right.
confused with DE&I initiatives because that's not what this is. And that remove the
Right.
politics out of it. Like I'm not here to talk politics,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
DE&I is a separate conversation than
Mhm.
grief and grief in the workplace specifically
Mhm.
because it's not about including or not including, but it's about safety. It's about health and wellness,
Mhm.
right? It becomes an OSHA issue where if you're not able to perform your job duties because your brain chemistry is mimicking signs of Alzheimer's, how
Mhm.
are you expected to do your job safely, effectively, and to full capacity?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
inhumane. It is simply
Mhm.
inhumane to expect
Exactly.
people to perform under these type of neurological conditions. It's psychological warfare.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
then we as the grieving are trapped in
Mhm.
this sense of guilt and obligation and contractual nature of like, oh, well, it's not that bad or oh, I'll deal with it later or go in the bathroom and dry your eyes real quick and freshen your face or go to your car in your lunch break and scream it out or then go home and default to bad vices, right? Like just that
Mhm.
after work cocktail or whatever your vice may be
Right.
to numb the feelings that you've been feeling all day, right? But if we
Mhm.
provide an environment that allows our employees to see themselves coming back to work, then we are ultimately creating an environment that is more productive for everybody, right? And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, as a business owner, productivity equals profitability, right? Like it's
You
one on
are
one. It's
right.
yeah, and like it's not rocket science. It's not a novel idea per se, but
Right.
how do
Exactly.
we help businesses just start to put the human back into HR? How do we practice those
Mhm.
collaborative relationships, both professionally and personally?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a hard question. Always. I asked it while I was in corporate. I was asking it while after corporate. Even working with a small business where it came to a point where the guy was yelling every day. And I was just like, why is this the norm in business? There's an attack level you feel. And so it was just that. It was,
Right.
okay, so how do we fix businesses? And then at that point, I was just finally like, okay, I'm just going to build my own. It'll be different. It'll be what it is, because that's what I needed.
Yeah.
Like, I needed something different. I have not seen it. We had moved to Oklahoma about 6 years ago, and it's a different workplace. Like, the only place I've ever worked at was in Colorado, in Oakland. So it was a much different workplace for me. And I was just like, whoa, I am somewhere very different. And, the work ethics and different things. It's just,
You're not in
much
Kansas
different.
anymore, Toto?
Nope. I was somewhere else from sure. But it definitely made sense then
Yeah,
after
we're
that.
not in
Like,
Kansas
just
anymore,
build.
Toto.
Yeah. Not at all.
Yeah. Just build your own business. Well, and that's
Yeah.
kind of, as I was going through the process, it was like, all right, structure this, right? And a solopreneur. I'm Cirque du Solo, a one-woman show is what I like to joke. That's my canned material, right? But as I think about growing and scaling and what's possible and probable and all of those other good words, it's like, what are the systems I want to have in place? What are the foundations I want to have? So when I do bring on other people, referral partner relationship or actual employees, the culture's already there. You don't have to go back and the wheel when you put the pillars in place to begin with. And that's why it's so important when you're developing your business to take the time to develop a purpose, a mission statement, a vision statement. Like, even if you don't have a website, even if it's just you in a notebook, highly recommend people taking the time, use the tools that are out there, know how to do it. Chat GPT. I think there's one called Brand AI. That use that to really deep dive into what your core values are. And then you can use that as the foundation as you're setting up the structure for the rest of your business.
Makes sense. Yeah. That's always a great foundation for me. I'm always like, oh yes, the foundation of your business is huge. And no matter what, because like you said, you're one person right now, but it's not going to always be that way unless you wanted to. Like, for me, I'm like, yeah, of course I needed a team. Like, that's how I worked in corporate. We developed teams. And so it was like, oh yeah, I need a team. I'm so used to working that way. But it made sense. Like, I meet lots of people that are like, no, I love doing this by myself, with myself. It's my own little hideaway. And they love their business, their self, like what they're doing. So it's so different about how we all see our businesses and what they mean to us.
Right. Yeah, no, I think for me, it's about eventually the goal is to hand certain pieces off to other people. I'm the show pony, so to speak. I get to go out and do the signature talks and be the face of the business. And this is my brainchild, tell people all about it. But then I get to bring in an army of experts, people who do more and better than what I could do. That's also another component to being an entrepreneur and a business owner, is about knowing where your strengths are and not being afraid to admit them and acknowledge them. And I am not a soup to nuts kind of a web designer when it came time to build a website, because I tried on Wix and all these other ones, and they're like, oh, use Squarespace. It's so user friendly. 3 weeks, a bottle of wine, and a whole lot of tears later, here I am signing the check to the web designer because I was like, I'm done. Yeah. This is not for me. So, I'm just saying, like, so know where your strengths are and know that it's okay to outsource, even if you are that solo person, right? If it's just yours, you still have to have people that you can trust and rely on and have relationships with. And that's where that empathetic connection comes back into play, right? Like, you can be a single employee operation and have a million referral partners based on your intention and your integrity and what you bring to the table. It's about what you put out, you'll get it back.
Yeah, exactly. Love that. Because we forget sometimes, it's I know I get put in my bubble when I'm really trying to get focused and get things done. And then I'm like, oh gosh, okay, there are people I need to talk to, and there's outside of this, connections to remake and do. Now I have my business besties and people I talk to all day or a couple times a week or every week or whatever. Like we have those people in our lives. And me and Angelique work in each other's businesses, so we tend to talk every day, or every other day at the very least. But it's still all the connections, all the people we still know, and it's continuing to make all the connections and say how are things going and genuinely care about how things are happening, what's happening in your world, how are people doing, kids are growing up, stuff is changing. And so we got to a point where that's really what it is for us, is that we're watching our businesses grow. They're coming in, they're getting things done. And we're watching people, and whether they work with us or not, or they've been on the podcast or they're part of other groups we're a part of, we get to cheer them all on and watch and see all of that. And for me, that's the exciting part. I love being a business owner, but I love being able to see and be in the mix, to be able to watch and see all this stuff happening and going on, because that's the fun part. Like everybody's in building, they're all kind of putting it together. And it's like,
I love that. Like there's such a community, like creation. There's this like alchemistic thing that happens when you unite with like-minded people. And I find that happens a lot in grief, right? A lot in business building. We're doing networking, we're doing connecting. In grief, we're doing support groups, we're doing, it's that language that you can't speak unless you've felt it. So it's taking all of those experiences when you're in that community, when you're in that little bubble, and using that alchemistic energy to forward manifest the things that you want to have happen in your business, right? Like for me, it's about how do I speak it into truth to the people who are going to be a mirror and hold me accountable for it. Here are the goals, and they're going to ask me about it. And I know they're going to ask me about it. And so that makes me want to work on it. And it's a double-edged sword. Like I love the whole concept of quantum jumping as a just envisioning, and then it is. Yes, much like when we take a pregnancy test, we trust the results. We don't keep testing. We accept it as truth. You have to do that. But you also have to do the work along the way to make it happen. You can't just go, poof. So how do we use that community, that camaraderie, that cheering squad to our advantage, and use those people? You put those things that you want to have happen out into the universe, and the universe is going to bounce them back to you. It's going to make you work for it, but it's going to bounce them back to you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think people get lost in that, or say, well, I don't need it in return. Yeah, you do. It's okay to need it too. And it's okay to want it, because you are giving with an idea. You're giving with an idea of there is no need for return.
Right.
But you're okay to get something back if something comes.
Yeah. You should get something back because it fills your cup to give other people. That's one way to get back. Or if you are in the mindset that you don't have any more growth to do, any more change to do, any more learning to do, then you're dead, right? Like when we stop learning is when we're dead. So how do you just change your mindset from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset? And even if you're coming at it from a place of good intention where you're saying, oh, it's not like I think I'm better than it, I just don't think I need it. Open your mindset and say, well, what is this lesson? And even if it's not for right now, stick it in your pocket and maybe it's for later, right? Take the lessons that the universe gives you, good, bad, and indifferent. That's something I had to learn the hard way, is like, stop trying to swim upstream. Just take the lumps when they come and go, okay, what's the lesson? And we breathe through it, and we pivot, we don't panic.
Right. I think I'm learning the no panic part. I'm used to the okay.
My mantra this year is we pivot and we don't panic.
Love it. Um, so I know that when we first initially talked in your meet and greet, we were talking about collaborating with women, what we do to support women in their businesses, and we've been talking about that. Do you have a story of some type of collaboration that you just loved, that you would love to talk about, or a situation that came
Yeah, I
up
mean,
where?
I think I think it's important to talk about the idea of competition, right, in business, especially when you
Mhm,
work in similar spheres or in the same sphere. For what I
mhm,
do, my job is fairly niche. Like nobody else really does what I do. There are people who do similar, do close, do adjacent, do some of, but nobody does
mhm,
what I do. And that is both a
right.
blessing and a curse. But when I think about how we work with other women, I think about how we partner with women who are adjacent what we're doing.
Mhm,
And
yeah.
while there's no direct competition in my industry, there are tons of other people who work in the death and dying sphere. And one
Mhm,
woman specifically comes to mind. She's now a very good friend of mine. We met through networking circles. And it came up several times like, oh, this woman might be like your competition. And so we finally had coffee and surprised to find out that we were both of the same mindset that in the work that we do in solo business ownership and entrepreneurship, and specifically in grief, there's no competition.
mhm,
How do we work
yeah.
together collectively to make a better environment? And so once,
Yeah.
her and I got on the same page, we actually started collaborating and doing programming together. So we did a podcast swap. We both have podcasts. And then, we did a couple of workshop things together. And end of the
Mhm,
summer last year, she was a presenter at my national grief conference. So that was really exciting. And now coming into this year, I'll be a keynote speaker at her premier grief festival happening in the spring. So it's been this build of
wow.
quid pro quo and like how do we build each other up? And it not only gives us each the credentialing that helps us secure other pieces of our business, but it also helps support
Mhm,
one another's business endeavors. It's marketing, it's support, it's promotion, it's hiring, it's you don't always have to hire your
yeah,
friends who are small business owners to support them, but you can like their posts, you can
right.
share their posts, you can share their links, you can, tell a friend, share a business card. There's so many things you can do. So for me,
Mhm,
hiring her as an expert presenter allowed me the
mhm,
opportunity to step back at my event and kind of oversee the whole thing. So it was beneficial to
mhm,
both of us. It wasn't just like throwing her a bone or vice versa, right? Like we don't do it to just do it. We do it because it has purpose. It's a value add and it continues to foster the relationship between us. So if I ever needed, God forbid, knock on wood, I had a family emergency. If I needed her, say, hey, I know this isn't your forte, but can you talk to this client for me? She would be able to
right.
help support seamless transition, especially because I
Mhm,
am a one woman business operation. My business doesn't have to shut down per se because I've fostered
right,
this relationship with this competition, if you will.
right.
So don't be
Yeah,
afraid of competition. Use it to your advantage, whether it be through surprise friendships or leverageability opportunities or
yeah,
negotiating opportunities, but don't be afraid of your competition. Invite the women in
absolutely.
your circle into your life.
Mhm, yeah. And I came into it, I think that with that idea in mind, I was never in sales when I was in corporate. And before that, I worked with teens. That's not sales. So for me, sales was a completely foreign idea. And I was like, oh God, like this is difficult. And I know in my mind I made it difficult, but it was also the idea of I don't like trying to compete. I compete with little things, like we do competitions here and there. But as a general
Mhm.
rule, I don't like to compete and bring people down or make it feel like I'm the only one who can win at this. So it was more like that. I rely on referrals. I rely on these things. If I meet people and we all rely on those things together within each other, that makes it so much easier. Um, And sure, there are some things that I have passed on to other people and referred out that we could have handled within the agency. Um, but we have our forte, and I have preferences on the things that we like to do within our business, plus who we serve and what our, our VAs are trained towards and project managers work with. So we make a lot of determinations, not just based on the work that's needed, but also different factors about, who we support and who we have that can support those businesses and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, leveraging those relationships comes in handy when you are able and willing to like help other people in their business endeavors, and then they are able to help you. It just creates that community, that camaraderie. So I'm a huge fan of women's networking groups specifically, but networking groups in general, and just building that pod of people who you can rely on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I love that. And then we talk about all the time, find your tribe. Definitely
Find
find
your
your pod.
tribe. Yep.
Yeah. Like definitely find where you belong in that. And it may not just be one place. So we did a discussion in my coaching group about belonging, and I am very much a loner. I am okay with being a loner. I don't try to fit in. I did masking for a long time in my life because of ADHD, but I did it in
Mm.
certain aspects around work, and different things. But when it came down to like real friendships and stuff like that, I just was who I was. I've always known it. People either really like me or hate me. I don't mind either way. I give you love. It's okay. If you weed yourself out, that's even better. I'm okay with those things. But I've
Yeah,
always
I
loved
love
that
that.
idea. Yeah, yeah. Because I'm like, I don't have to weed you out. You do. You found me off-putting. That's fine.
I always say, I understand I am not everyone's flavor, but if I am too much, go find less respectfully. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I spent a lot of time being somebody else for a lot of other people. And after my
Mhm.
husband died, it was the stark realization that I get to be whoever I want and that I am the master of my domain. So if I am
Yeah.
unhappy, it's by my own doing for the most part. I have to
Mhm.
really design my existence and be thoughtful and intentional. And so if someone does not like me or does not want to give me time and energy, I'm not going to continue to chase the things that are not meant for me very clearly. It is if I am too much, go find less. If I
Yeah.
am if I am too loud, if I am too bossy, if I am too whatever, like I got spent so much
Mhm.
time being told that, and we're not doing that anymore.
Right.
And that's not to say like I don't have imposter syndrome. There are totally days where I'm like, I suck, this sucks, everything sucks. But you have to eventually know your worth and stop giving
Mhm.
discounts on yourself. It really is
Mhm.
about letting other people cash in on your value. How do you hold yourself up? And that's where that community comes back into play is when you start to slide and that imposter syndrome, that community holds you up.
Yeah, yeah. It is so needed. When you come into business, you think, oh, well, you got to do all the things. And again, you worry about, competition, conversations, who's going to do what. And there are ick people, there just is. And I just let them be ick. But it really comes down to you're going to build your business the way that you want to. You're going to be around people that you want to be with. And that's what always seems so wonderful. Because when you finally get to that point where you're like, I get to be around a bunch of people that I absolutely enjoy and love to be around. I'm not working with people that I don't want to deal with every day. I am building something that feels so much better. That's when you start to really be like, oh, wow, women can really get this together and we can do this and we do so much more. And the communities grow bigger and bigger when women are the ones thriving. We were meant to be there. It's been such a long road. And it's so exciting to see that, as you come together, as you find people around, not really belonging or belonging, you find eventually a belonging. But it never feels forced or pushed. I've never felt like I had to belong. I'm just there and I do, or whatever. So that makes it a great space. but it definitely is, you know, really coming into your own. And what side of business? I think there's a clear kind of side of business that's happening where people are like, we are doing good things. We really want to build, to do more, and to do good. And I say good, bad in no real reference because I don't really believe in good, bad, but it's that same kind of thing where we seem to be kind of moving towards sides that don't always agree. You know, we need those opposites, but it
Yeah,
definitely is good to see at least there's some flow. But yeah,
for sure, for sure.
love it. Hold on, sorry.
Yeah,
I think I went in delay, so I apologize. I don't know where I was.
you're all right. You're good.
Okay. So I love this one, and Angelique always brings it in. The most challenging thing you ever faced in your business or personally. Um, and we kind of went over
That's
that
pretty
a little
obvious
bit
one for
with
me,
talking
right?
about your
Yeah,
journey with the business. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That was
um,
kind of an obvious one for
but
me, you know, that
I'm
challenging part.
right. But we have a section in there that changes it a little bit and talks about how it brought the improvement in your life. So I know it was a really hard thing to go through, but more
Sure.
of what that really, what it did, what it finally came
Yeah,
to in the hindsight, you know, of all of
yeah,
that.
yeah. And I love that question because a lot of people I think struggle to look at grief with gratitude. A lot of people struggle to look at grief with nostalgia, with grace, with enjoyment. And that sounds really like messed up and dark. But at the end of the day, it's the gift of perspective. That's what I like to say. Craig gave me the gift of perspective, much like masking for ADHD, which, girl, same. There's masking, not necessarily in a conscious way or in a bad way, but when you're married to someone, your life just kind of becomes theirs, even without meaning to. And we had our own friend circles and we had our own things and our own hobbies and our own whatever. And I had my own job and I was my own person. I very much had my own identity, but I was a married couple for almost 10 years. And so things get very blurry and murky. And after he died, it was I think the first time I went to order pizza after he died and I default like put mushrooms on it or something. And then I went, I don't have to do that anymore. And there was this freeing sense of relief that I don't have to order mushrooms on my pizza anymore. And immediately followed with this huge wave of guilt and grief and awfulness where I was like, oh my God, I'm never ordering mushrooms again. Who the hell am I? And it was this identity crisis. But it took that kind of rebirthing where you literally learn how to interact with people again from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
You learn what your preferences are, you learn what your tolerances are, you learn what your relationships are like. It's like going through infancy all the way up through teenagerhood in a 6-month span.
Right.
And that journey,
Mm-hmm.
that trial by fire really gave me this understanding and appreciation of this version of me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a lot of sadness about Craig would never recognize this version of me. But this version also would not be possible had he not died.
Yeah.
And this is the version that had the power, the capacity, the knowledge, and the resiliency to start a business,
Mm-hmm.
to become a homeowner, to raise 2 children, to, to jump out of an airplane, to go to Paris, to pierce her nose, to ride the motorcycle, to do all those bucket list things that were just pipe dreams before.
Right.
He gave me the appreciation that life is a gift. Life is really short.
Mm-hmm.
For as long as the days are, life is really short.
Yeah.
And you have to strike while the iron is hot, right? Like those opportunities come and you have to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Those moments, those gut reactions are there for a reason. And so
Yeah.
the most challenge in my life is I'm losing my husband, but the most rewarding thing, as messed up as it sounds to say out loud, has been losing my husband, because in his
Mm-hmm.
death, I was born the real
Yeah.
version of me that couldn't exist prior.
Oh, I
Mm.
love that. Brought tears to my eyes. That's
Oh,
no, and it doesn't compare in any way. When my mother passed, and I was relieved, people were like, "How dare you?" And I was like, "I just spent
yeah.
10 years doing this. She was fine. She's
Grief is
happy.
those
She's good to go.
leftover
She
love
helps
that
get
we didn't get.
to her vocation, you know?
Yeah, she was ready.
Yeah. But it was everybody else kind of around, and not always the ones closest to me, but it still cut. There were times and I was like, maybe that is a bit selfish, or maybe it's this. And it took a few months for me to be like, oh yeah, F all of you. Because
Yeah.
yes, I was there was a reality there. I did not want to watch this anymore. I didn't want to be on that channel. I didn't want to watch what was happening anymore. He suffered, we all suffered. It was a terrible situation. We didn't want to do that anymore. So yes, I was relieved. And when I finally owned that shit, I was like, it felt so much better. And every time somebody brought it up, I was like, yep, go deal with your own demons. Leave me alone. Like it really was a walk away. I
Yeah.
don't want to hear.
But there's
Boundaries
a
went up.
power
It
in
was
that assertion. And once you create that boundary, and once you get that clarity of like what's important to you, that's what grief does. Grief creates the opportunity for clarity. Well, that sounds counterintuitive to anybody who's in early stages of grief. They're gonna be like, no, it doesn't. Grief really shows you what relationships in your life are there. And that doesn't mean like grief is going to change your relationships. That's not to say that the people who aren't in your life anymore because you're a couple and they don't know how to interact with you doesn't mean they don't still have love for you and cheer you on from afar. I don't mean that like,
Right.
I just mean it changes you and it changes your capacity to have relationships. And so grief makes you a bad friend. I always say, and keep it, censored for whatever, but grief gives you an excuse to be. Grief gives you an excuse to be, does not absolve you of the consequences of being said a-hole. There's several times in my journey in grief where I've made poor choices as a friend, and as a result, I've lost a friend because of it. But at the end of the day, I'm accountable for it. I can apologize. But it's up to that person if they want to continue to have a relationship with this version of me. That's all I can do is be accountable for it, right? Like grief is going to change every facet of who you are. But there's also a power in that where you are able to just say, once the laws of physics no longer apply to me, the laws of physics no longer apply to me, and anything is on the table. And that is really where you wield power, is when you have that awareness and understanding that you are the master of your domain. It's not just words.
Yeah. And you can feel about it however you want over here. Or
Right.
you can say whatever you want. Like it's
You just
and
clean
I
up
don't
your own
mind
side of the street. Just clean up your own side of the street. That's not for me to worry about. That sounds like a them problem. Right? Like,
exactly. I love
take
it.
that off your plate. Talked about outsourcing things. We're going to outsource that.
Right. Exactly.
We just want to delegate things right back to them. This is for you. This is your task for the day. Yep. Let me know how it works out. Let me know when you reach a resolution with you.
Absolutely. I love it.
I love it.
I think that's where most of us get stuck is it doesn't matter. And I've pissed off more than my share of people in my lifetime, partially with that same demeanor. My friends have always known I'm a quick cutoff, but what they don't know is how long it took for me to get there. I give little warnings, I say things, I get real blunt and blatant about stuff, and then I have a propensity for mean. If we've hit mean, I'm always shocked that you haven't figured it out. So I'm like, if I'm already being mean and you still think
That you got to
there's
run right
nothing,
with me.
you might want to run now, because that always ends in tears, which I hate, because I don't ever want to hurt anyone in that process.
Right.
But if you're not seeing it, and it's not that, and people say, you can't change me. I don't want to change you. I have zero interest in changing you. What I am saying to you is I'm changing. So if you want to be a part of this, you either accept, or I'm fine with who you are if I'm still talking to you.
Right. But like, this is
You
who I
know?
am. So get on the bus or get out of the way.
Exactly. Like, same respect. I may not approve. I found things out recently about my sister, which I've known certain things in our life, but it was one of those, okay, well, I want to ask questions, but I always come off, family's a little bit harder. So I always come off in that real judgmental way. And I didn't want to do that. So I was just like, oh, okay, interesting. And then I went to somebody else and started asking questions that I knew would answer me and let me, without knowing I wasn't being judgmental, but I just really had a whole shit ton of questions. So I could ask them the way I needed to ask them without hurting anyone's feelings. And then in the end, I was like, oh, okay. So I still had no feeling about it. Like, I don't care. It's not my life. Yay, yippee. But it was, I got all the answers I needed. And in the past, I always insisted I needed to get them from the source, from her in that moment. And it comes off really bad for us. So I've also learned where, okay, I can really just be an okay works. And I can leave in that moment, in that situation, with okay being what it is, and then go somewhere else to figure out whatever it is else I need to figure out from there, or
Yes.
have my judgmental moment, but not with that person. If I absolutely need to have one, then okay, but it doesn't need to be at them, kind of.
Right. Like, perfect is the enemy of good. And I think that we forget that sometimes in ourselves, in our parenting, in our relationships, in our business. Perfect is the
Mhm.
enemy of good. And there's a time for good enough and out the door, and there's a time to go back and do iterations, and that we pivot, we don't panic mindset. And how do
Mhm.
we take that whole philosophy of work ethic and translate it into how we relate to people? Is we can have that boundary conversation where we say, I'm feeling really frustrated right now, and I'd love to have a conversation about this with you, but I'm not in a great place. Can we schedule a time to talk?
Mhm.
Like, even a text message, like, we need to connect. Can we book some time?
Right.
One
Yeah.
sentence, right? It's like, how do we establish those healthy boundaries for ourselves and still
Mhm.
be our authentic selves now that we have the perspective, that gift through change and alchemy and relationship building? And it just all
Mhm.
keeps coming back in this big like circle. I don't know. I could talk in loops all day, I feel like.
I love it. No, and it's so important. I do want to share, like, what you are doing, and working in grief is hard. And being able to work in that arena, and still have joy and still have good energy and still be able to work with people, it takes a very special heart. So I
Oh,
appreciate what you're doing. It's so needed. And um, grief can be what it is. We all deal with it differently. And being able to have someone there to just kind of deal with it with you in your own space and non-judgment and things is always a much better, feeling, for sure. So
yeah.
I
Well, and I think
appreciate that.
about like, I worked retail for a long time. I did, retail management for, God, almost a decade. And it always surprised me, other managers who would come in and say, like, how did you get them to do blah blah blah? Or, oh my god, I didn't know XYZ about said associate, like, how do you blah blah, or why are you giving them a ride home? And I'm just like, you want them to work their asses off for you for no money and minimal
Mm-hmm.
breaks, and you expect them to do it at just the wave of your hand? What's in it for them? And so I'm listening to you talk, and
Right.
I'm listening to you about that relationship building, and I think about you taking the time to set those boundaries and be able to step away from situations is like leading you're not trying to change those people, but you're leading those people through a change. And I had to do that a lot in the retail management, right? They need to see that you can get down in the weeds with them. So I would be doing the floor set with them, and I would be mopping and the bathroom, and I would be doing inventory in the back, and I'm there until 11 p.m. with them, and I'm making sure my girls have rides home and aren't standing out in, you know, the city at night at 11 o'clock at night in December. I'm making sure, like, did you eat? No, here's $2. Go to Starbucks and get a cake pop or something. Like, not to like be their mother,
Right.
but to show basic human decency. These girls are college age kids. They're coming in, like this one girl, I think her boyfriend was beating her, and she would come in just like crying every day. And all the other managers would be like, fix your face and get on the floor. You're late. And I'd be like, girlfriend, like, and we would go sit in the office and talk, or sometimes I would call her a cab and send her home, or like, here's $10, go to Panera, clock in an hour from now. Don't worry about it. Like, how do we just meet people where they're at? And even when we have boundaries to hold, once we're able to make that initial connection with people and foster that relationship, even when we have internal change, they're going to stick with you through it because they know that you will be in the weeds with them. And they know that when you come back from it, that you're going to have their back in the same instance. So it's really just about like what you were saying. How do we be able to have that conversation with people where we can hold our own boundaries and know who we are after grief, but still foster positive forward momentum?
Right. Yeah, definitely. And that's, I think, where businesses are really starting to change, because that's a thought. Like, yes, we do need people that are working, and there's a consistency and stabilization that needs to happen, but it's not happening now. Things are so in such a structure that that's not working either. So I'm like, we can't say that that's the answer. There's a different answer. And again, and for me, we were just talking this morning about my control, and like, I need to have the answer. I'm that person. I'm the problem solver. Bring an answer. I have an answer. So now I'm supposed to be working on not having the answer, more just, okay, I need to let it be what it is. But also, really, because that's what I want to build, is that difference. And so since that's different, my idea of having all the answers doesn't work. Now I can solve the problem. I can talk through what's happened. If something comes up, I know how to handle it on the back end or whatever. But trying to control the initial outcome is the one thing that I'm learning to let go of.
Yeah, embracing the ambiguity. That's my weakness too, is ambiguity. So I praise you so much for that. But it does come in handy, because once you embrace the ambiguity and you kind of release that need to be in control, you gain so much power and autonomy and freedom. And that's where the control feeling comes from, at least for me, is that like, once I release that like tight death grip on control, I have so much more control.
Yeah. Right. Like, wait, that's what's gonna happen then. Oh, wait, okay, I can do this. But again, when we're flipped, because the same thing. You think negative, you get more negative. I really don't want that. Let me give you more.
Yeah. Get what you call the opposite. Call in the positive.
Yeah. And I have, with even my kids, I was a firm believer in telling them, like, don't ask. There's two things. Don't ask a question you don't want the answer to. And don't ever say it can't get worse. Like, we don't put that out there. That's not something you ever say, because it has been proven time and time again that it can. So I'm like, we don't say that, and we don't ever, we don't put those two things out. And so they giggle, because I would still, to this day, I'll be like, are you asking me a question you really want the answer to?
That's right.
And if it's a yes, then it's going to come out how it's going to come out. There's no sugarcoating. There's no holding your hand. It just is what is. You want the answer, here it is. And then I'll stop and explain, but I got to get it out. And
I like
so, So
like
it's
it.
like, well, here we go. So they've learned through the years. Like, do you sure you want to answer? Like, oh yeah, no, I'm
Yep.
okay. If yeah, no, we're good with that. So I love it. Well, it looks like we had a I'm sorry, a post in here or a comment in here. Quantum jumping, Burt Goldman's "Everything You Need to Know" guide. Oh, somebody was. Never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, Burt Goldman apparently.
Hmm.
Nope.
Nope.
So wonderful. Well, it is. I'm sorry we're taking up your time. There's a lot. We try to hold them shorter. I just loved what we were talking about. So
Oh no, that's no problem. I think this is
um,
great.
absolutely. Um, we are going to wrap it up here. We will say bye. I am hoping that everybody, we're on the wait list for the membership. If you want to be, just let us know. We are going to add Kate's links to all the show notes of where you can find her. So all the links and hyperlinks and everything will be in there as well as anything that we mentioned within the show. All the links to all of that will also be in the show notes. And I am super excited. I made a mistake. We do have a guest next week. I do not have her bio with me right now, so I'm not able to introduce her, and I apologize. But her name is Nancy White. Nancy, I will get that information out there, so look for that. But she will be here next week, and we look forward to hearing from you every week. If you want to be on the podcast, you can. The information will be in the show notes, and you can definitely reach out to us to be on the podcast. If you'd like to meet with Kate, make sure you reach out to her as well with her links. And we're just so glad you were here and so excited. Definitely get to know Kate. Like I said, our first conversation was so amazing, and there's so many things behind the scenes and all the lovey witchy woo stuff that we like to go over. So definitely get to know her, set up time with her, and yeah, all the witchy woo stuff. So but thank you everyone, and have a wonderful day.